Dr. Ivar Jacobson has both academic and industry career. He's famous for his component architecture, Rational Unified Process, UML, and most recently, CMAT Essence. He's the author of 10 books, more than 100 papers, and a frequent keynote speaker around the world. I had a pleasure to participate in one of Ivar's group projects that later on allowed me to introduce him today to us. The title of his speech is Tear Down the Method Prisons, Set Free the Practice. So Ivar, the stage is yours.
So here we are. When I got on, asked me to present, and he wanted me to give his presentation, I thought it would be no problem. I have that presentation already, so just to take it down from the shelf. But a lot of things had happened since I gave it last time. So this is 80% new stuff. And what we didn't know when we said yes was that I would get the corona, the virus. So 2 weeks ago, I actually got out of quarantine. And amazingly, I feel fantastic. And I'm really, as we say in Swedish, taggad att prata idag. So yeah, I think it's better I keep to my English, even if my English is very much influenced that I am from the very south of Sweden, Skåne. So let's get started. My talk will be around subjects you should all know, but the reality is that the more background in software development you have, the more you will be able to have opinions and give fabulous feedback, which I expect. And not necessarily positive, but at least feedback. And so I'll start with talking about the situation today. How mature are we? If we go and look over the history from all the years we have developed software, we have had many different ways of doing it. The first methods were actually separating. They more looked like a computer. So you had a data store and a program store, and you model that. But 25 years ago, it was all about object orientation. That was probably when I personally myself started to be involved and gave talks at conferences around the world. 20 years ago, it was all about components, unified modeling language, rational unified process, my baby. I was involved in all this. I was a rock star, traveling around the world, talking to 10,000 people about how to develop software. And we were the gurus of the world, loved by people, crazy situation. 50 years ago, it was all about CMMI. CMMI, you know, everybody should be certified, CMMI certified, measuring that you knew how to do it, but not measuring if what you did was good. That was out of the question. The only thing we measured that is you knew what you were doing. If you were developing garbage, you knew how to develop garbage. That was CMMI. And then we got Agile, extreme programming, Scrum, Kanban. That became very popular around 2000. And now it's scaling agile that is popular. Scale to big systems, big organization. And you know one thing, tomorrow there will be something else. And those of us who have been on this trip that I have been, know that what it will be tomorrow. I hope you will know it too soon. So all of them had something good. But the problem was, after every one of them, you threw out all you knew of the old and started all over to learn a new way of doing it. So the problem is not that these were not good contribution. That is not the real problem. Today it's scaling agile. And here you see some of the most famous. You see the most famous is SAFe. And then you have discipline, agile, deliver, DAD, you have Nexus, you have large scale Scrum, you have Scrum at scale. There are many, many, many. And they are all widely used, all provide great value when adopted, all have good practice. So that's not the problem. But if you look at this picture, just look at the picture, they look so different. What's the relationship between them? You cannot, and you have to really be inside a picture to understand it. So there is no way to relate them to one another. It's completely isolated silos. But still, that's not the real problem. So what are the problems? So I actually have a few slides for each one of these points, but I will try to do it quick because otherwise we can spend time in history forever. History may be interesting, but I'm actually much more interested in the future. But I mean, the fact that we are at the methods war for all these times, all these famous people for all these years have not collaborated. Instead, they fight. They fight about the hegemony. They fight about what is the best. And they build sects around them. And if you get into one sect, you fight the others. And it's has been like this for 50 years. And if we don't do anything, we will continue. Practices are locked into method prison. Well, you have a lot of practices that all methods use. For instance, user stories, test-driven development, self-organizing teams, blah, blah, blah. There are lots of them that are generic. I call them generic practices. But then the practices that are specific for a method, for instance, and DAD has value streams and so on, that are good. They cannot be used by other methods without rewriting. So, and that is why we call it method prison. You sit in a method prison. Horrible to be in a method prison. Methods are controlled by gurus. Yeah, we have gurus. Can you imagine an industry that is so huge all around the world have gurus that tell people, you do like this, right? And I personally was a guru. I know the life. It was very sweet life because people liked you and people did what you wanted. I remember when I worked for Rational, they had a big deal somewhere in Germany and they sent me to talk we have talked a long time, but nothing happened, to talk to the CIO. I spent 2 hours with the CIO and I told him basically, I think you can trust using our technique. He signed a contract to $2 million next day. I mean, this is so crazy. Anyway, all methods are monolithic. It means you cannot take pieces from one method and use another one because they use completely different ways of describing. The only thing they share, which I can go on here, they are homegrown. So every method, if you take the methods I talk about, all methods in the history, all methods we have ever had, have been written according to a guru's preferred style of writing. So there is no commonality. You have to start from the beginning. There is nothing they share. They don't even share what is software engineering, what is software development, what does requirement mean, and so on. Yeah. And so even if all methods actually have the same objective, help people to develop software, there is nothing in common, no common ground, as I said. God, I became too passionate here, sorry for that. This is, in my opinion, immature and foolish. And as you see, I have a little red thing here, and this is for me to ask you a question. So now I would love to ask you a question. And you can press buttons. And please do it very quickly because we don't have time. I believe I have to go out of this and go, where do I go now to see? No, I shouldn't have to do that, right? Can someone tell me how to do it?
Just stay with the presentation and then choose the participant button to see the responses.
But I cannot see, I don't get the participant button.
Try at the top of the screen, it's hidden there.
Ah, good. There it is, all right. So here now, my question to you, how many really feel this is a crazy situation? And if you feel it's a real crazy situation, you say yes. If you don't feel it's, press the button yes. If you don't feel it crazy, you say no. And I get the feeling for where you are. I calibrate the audience so I know what to say next. Okay, only 6 has responded, 7 people have responded. And let's see. So, yeah, come on, press. You have 50 people.
Ivar, we also some replies in the chat box. Yeah. And there's a question if you can repeat your questions.
So how many agree with me that this is a crazy situation, foolish, that we don't have that we have methods war, that we don't have a common ground, that we don't have anything we share, even if we do the same thing? There is something we should share. Okay. Now it looks much better. Thank you for that. I love you. This is what I want to hear. So now see if I can go back to the presentation. Yes, should do that. This is me mature and foolish. Okay. So what do we need to do? The first thing we need to do is, of course, to find some commonalities, some common ground, something we say, this is really nothing we should discuss anymore because we all agree that these are the facts. And we call that a common ground. We also call it the kernel of software engineering. And I describe what that really meant. We have the common ground that we have now developed is essence. So to get the real understanding what this common ground is, it is text. It is not any physical like hardware or code. It's just descriptions that are such that we can agree this is a common ground. So, and this is something we have now, first time in 50 years of software engineering. We have got one. It's a standard. It's approved by an object management group. It was developed by hundreds of people who were involved, and And I saw my very good friend Arne Berre is here today, which made me a little nervous, but also he was actually a very driving force to get this standard adopted. So what is it? Then it's two aspects. It has a technical aspect and a human aspect. And all what you see here is new. You don't find this in any other framework. Of course not, because this is common. It's true for every methodology. So on a technical side, we use a completely new user experience. We use poker-sized cards because they have very clear, a card can have very little documentation on it, and it is also very focused. It focuses on what is really essential. What does that mean, essential? Well, I try to define it, but if it is usually very little of what an expert knows, maybe 5%. But it is the essentials. And if you have that knowledge, understand the essence, then you can participate in teamwork, you can follow what's going on, you can learn more and more as time goes by. It has two components. It's a language, which is very trivial. You learn it in 2 hours. It's a very simple language, meaning it's symbols. You use symbols to talk about an activity, use symbols to talk about a work product like a document, and so on. And then it's the kernel. And the kernel are these things that we always have when we develop software. Always produce, always work with. So that's the technical stuff. If we move over to the human side, it's a thinking framework. It helps us to think about the right things when we develop software. It has numerous placeholders for conversations. Basically, every little card is a placeholder for conversation. You have you can, in the team, sit and look at the same card and talk about interesting things related to that card. And software development can be described as a set of serious interactive games. Games motivate people. Games engage them. You will soon see what it means. So this is essence. Essence is basically it's the common ground. It's something that everyone can agree on. No one should be able to say, no, I don't like this. This is not relevant, because all of it is relevant. That's why it could be a standard. So now I'll go through with you very quickly one part of the kernel. This is probably the part that requires your most attention to get it. Here I'll talk about a concept that is completely new to Essence, through Essence, never existed before. We have always had it in a way, but we never talked about it. And that is the concept of alphas. Alphas are the most important things in software engineering. So starting with, there are customer needs to be met. In every project, there are customer needs to be met. And so this is one area of concern you always have to, customer area. And in that customer area, we have two alphas. Someone has a problem or opportunity to address. So someone has an opportunity. That's why we build. If there's no opportunity, we don't do anything. And there are stakeholders who will fund, use, and benefit from the solution produced. So we have two alphas here in this space. And what does that mean that they are alpha? Yeah, you can talk about them. You can say how far are we with our stakeholders, but you cannot touch them. There are no documents related to it. I'll give you a little bit better example when you talk about the solution. There is a solution to be delivered, I mean software for instance, and there are certain requirements to be met. There needs to be requirements. Whatever we call it, there needs to be something we can call this solution needs to have requirements. And then there is the software system you actually build. So if you look at requirements, when you start building something, you don't know much about what you're building. You have an idea, and that idea is enough to basically start discussion about how we're going to implement that idea. And then you can talk about stakeholders. What do they want? So the requirements, we are not talking about the specification. We are not talking about any documentation at all when we talk about alphas. You can imagine we talk about this thing will have requirements, but we don't have any documentation. We have it in our heads or whatever. So alphas are elements that we cannot touch, but we have an intuitive understanding of what they are. There are also another area, and that is the endeavor, the project. In that project, we have work to be done, we have a team, and we have a way of working, some kind of method. And when you start the project, the team, you don't have any, you just have money maybe. You have no team members, but you have money to require a team. The next step is that you identify team members. And it's the next state of that alpha. You identify team members. And then next step is these people start to collaborate, but we are not doing very well because they have different opinions and so on. So basically every alpha, the only thing we know about an alpha is that it has states, and you progress these states from state to state to state. All right, that is one part of the kernel, the most important part, namely the alphas. And I'll show you more about it now in how we represent an alpha. So every alpha has a card like this. So, and every alpha has a number of states it goes through. So for instance, opportunity, when you have an opportunity, the first state you get to is there is an identified opportunity. Then there is a solution needed for that opportunity. A value are established, it's viable, addressed, and benefit accrued. So we go through these states, and you progress. When you work, you have to progress, so go through state by state like that. When it comes to the product, the software system, it also has states. First state is you have selected an architecture for it. Next is it's demonstrable, it's usable, it's ready, operational, and eventually after 100 years, it's retired. So product development is the process of converting uncertainty to knowledge. From the beginning, you know very little, and you have to work to know more and more. This is a quote from someone. Anyway, and then every alpha, here we have the opportunity alpha. It has states. So in this case, the opportunity, you can go from identified, solution needed, value established, viable, addressed, benefit accrued. So these 6 states. For every state, there is a checklist. So to pass and get into identified, you need to check 3 different boxes. And then to move to opportunity, a solution needed, you have 5 boxes to check, etc. So that's how you progress your work. The checks measure real outcome, not activity done or document produced. That is very new. Checklists in historically have always said, have you done this activity, and so on. That's a checklist. Or have you produced this document, and so on. Here we are talking about measurements that are not related to any particular document. It's real outcome. You can measure it. So here, again, the question to be asked, yeah, what could that be? Let me ask simple questions. Have you been able to follow me here now? Have you been able to follow my presentation so far? And where do I now look? Oh, here it is. So please answer as quickly as you can. Again, you have already. So you have to, I guess you have to null what you did before.
I did, Ivar, I did null it, so there are now 18 responses for your last question.
So these responses, they have been able to follow. 18, 19 have been able to follow.
That's
wow.
correct. That's correct.
Yep, wonderful. Then we move on. I hope all the others have followed too, but maybe. Okay, so now I'll show you. So this should be an interesting follow-up on all that. So now you know the background. You know that the kernel, the essence, is basically all represented by cards. So it's text. All you have are on cards. This is a picture to the left. I am talking in. This is actually in China. It was Huawei. Huawei. Interesting company. And we had 30 Scrum Masters to the left in the room and presented to them essence. And you know, the normal way, people sit there quietly, they listen, you may get some questions, normal teaching. But what we did now is we move over to a big table and I played a game with them. You see people around here, they look at the cards, they talk, they ask questions. In the first to the left, no one in China talks. They listen to their manager. In the right, they were all talking, very active. And that is the point. And it's very hard to communicate in a presentation like this. You have to really try to put yourself under the skin of it. So here we are doing something interesting. I built a health monitor. Oh, this is, sorry for this interruption. I hope he understands not call again. So we had here laid out the cards. So to the left, we have all the alphas, you know, with states on them. And to the right, we have the cards, state cards. So one card for each state. So they are laid to the right. And we have a slider here. So now the team sitting around the table had to decide, where are we in this project? Where are we? And you imagine, all of you have experience from trying to explain, where are we in this project? Where are we? And you have all kinds of words, you invent words, you describe by example how far you are, but measure it agnostically, really agnostically. So it's really hard, but let's do it here. So what you do, you take the first line here, which is stakeholder, and you look at each card, this card here. See now here. So first you look at the material you have. Here's some documentation, so you can look at the documentation. Here's a use case diagram, and there may be components, there may be a lot of stuff that is produced. And that we don't know anything about in essence. But what we know is that when we take each one of these here, we take the first card. Have we reached the state recognized stakeholders? Are the stakeholders recognized? Have the stakeholders been identified? Yes, we say that. There is an agreement between to be represented. Yes, and responsibility of stakeholder representatives is defined. Okay, that is done. So what happens? We move a card to the left. Then we take the next card and do the same thing. Basically, to save time, I just click it here. We agree all this is done. So that card we move also to the left. We take the third card and look at that. No, we have not done this. Okay, so that card has to stay. We go down and take line by line. Now it's opportunity. Have we identified opportunity? Yes, we have, but we have not done anything more. We look, yes, we had, okay, we actually had done more. We had taken the next state too, but not any further. And now we go down to requirements, yes. And we have a little bit of a solution. We have identified architecture for the, what we should use. And we had started to do, find a team. The team is funded. So we have money for select people. And finally, we didn't do anything about way of working. That is still up in the air. But we have created work, and we have gone 2 steps in the work. So look here, this simple picture show you where you are. These things are done, and you can use the same health monitor independent how you work. It's not dependent that if you use Scrum or you use Kanban or you use SAFe or whatever project you. This can be applied for on every level, for the team level. It can be applied on the program level. It can be applied on any level in the organization. So now we know where we are. This is how far we have reached. So now we take next and say, look at where do you want to go next? Well, it's very easy then. You just go to the right of the line and select the cards you think you want to achieve in the next iteration, for instance. So, okay, this is a kind of health monitor. It's agnostic to the way you work. It can be used in any proper way. So now, a question again to you all. Yeah, basically, have you been able to understand? Yeah, make it a simple question. Have you been able to understand how engaging, sitting and talking, looking at the cards like people do? People sit and look at card, talk about the card. Oh, we have done that. Have we done it? Have we really done it? And there that's not one answer. Sometimes a team would have different opinions about if something is done or not. But it stimulates the discussion. People get to a conclusion, and they eventually agree on what to do. So, so now how do I do? Yeah, participants. So the question here now is, can I click it? Yeah. So the question is very simple. Can you understand the engagement a team feels when we sit and talk about where they are and where they want to go, and when they can use cards like this to talk about? I see we have got 12. Okay, come on. Yeah, and is there anyone who doesn't feel they understand it? So they would like to press no? No, it's very positive. I'm really grateful. I mean, I hope, of course, that it would work like this, but you never know. And so now we have. So what I just have done is we have discussed the kernel, and we have played a game, and there are many games to play. We have published at least, I think, 25 games. On the kernel, there are, in the book, I think we are talking about 5-6 kernel games, only on kernel. But then every practice add new games. So let's see, we go to next, and that is, now we are going to build practices on top of a kernel, and I will focus on Scrum. So here we now have one set of cards. By the way, I should show you. This is the whole, can you see me now? This is this alpha cards. This is the kernel. This is the whole kernel and its alphas. It's a deck of cards, and you understand how easy it is to work with cards, and you have people discuss it. So now here is a Scrum Essentials card, and these are developed with Jeff Sutherland, who is one of the co-creators of Scrum. It's his content that are here, but we did the job for him to do it. Now we have many other practices. Here, for instance, we have a similar set of cards, deck of cards for user stories, use cases, Kanban, test-driven development, DevOps, and 30 other practices are published in our practice library. So let's look at how we use it for Scrum, just to get one really good example. By the way, there is a paper published in ACMQ. It's a very prestigious documentation. The title is Scrum Essentials Cards. And here you'll see 6 games played with these cards. I will just show you one of them. But first I'll present the cards. There are things to do in Scrum. Totally there are 21 cards, the whole Scrum. And here are the things to do, that's activities, work. And each card has a little different syntax for that. We have the things to progress. These are the alphas specific for Scrum. And for instance, in Scrum, there is in a sprint alpha, which has states like every other alpha. The product backlog item is an alpha, improvement is an alpha, and it has 3 states. And then there is things to produce. These are just work products or documents. For instance, a definition of done. What does definition of done mean? And there is a card for that. And as you understand, there is very little text on the cards, but it stimulates discussion. People can easily talk at it, point at it. It's not big documents. Normal books are just too much for people to read. And normal presentations, you know, if you go attend some of these courses, I remember particularly SAFE has a 4-day course where people go through 360 slides. Can you imagine? And how much do people know when they leave the course? They have to make a test, so they be approved, but well. They have states, like alphas have states, like everything else, and that allow us to play many games. I will not go into this more, but there are specific alphas for every practice that are not standard, of course, but they belong to the practice. And they have checklists, as every alpha has. Here's a game, very simple game. On you see people sitting here and they are talking, engaged, and discuss. There are an x-axis which is has phases. If you are happy, it's green. If you're unhappy, it's red, and otherwise it's not so good or something like that. And then on the y-axis, which goes down, we have one box for what is something is very important, another less important, and finally irrelevant. Stop it. We have then so then you take the chords in the scum deck, these chords, and put them in the right box. There are very important things we are doing very well. There are very important things that we do very bad. There is one chord there, or maybe there are two other three chords there, and so on. And then the team discuss what actions should we do, and they go ahead with these actions. Yes, so you make a list of actions. So I think I skipped the question here because it's engaging, and you cannot imagine. You have to really be there to feel and be part of it to really get the feeling for how valuable and how constructive it is to work like this. So now let's go to a next objective. We are going to build an ecosystem of practices from which you can build your own methods. Imagine you have an ecosystem, and in that ecosystem you go and pick the practices you need. You don't get a method full of practices to start with, because you don't really understand why I should have all this stuff. Instead, you start with just the kernel is there at the bottom, and you add more and more to it. So let's see how that is done. So we imagine we have an ecosystem where you have already, in the center is the kernel, because it's standard, and then you have your existing practices described using essence, the kernel. So you have cards for every practice like that. You can also have, for instance, safe. Actually, we have done the job to essentialize safe once, but we have not published it. It's not a big deal. It's much smaller than safe is as it is in today. Disciplined agile delivery. It's already has already practices, a lot of practices. I think they say 700 practices, but of course they are not described in disciplined agile. They could be described here, available. Nexus is another one based on Scrum. So imagine here you have these four parts of library. They are described the same way, same standard, and so on. Now you want to do something. You select the practice you like, and you know that this is something we really understand we need. You don't get a lot of practices that you don't know why I should use. You select practices that fit your problem. And then you ignore the rest. You don't need them. And you put it all together to a method. So this is one method that you have created based on your need, not because someone has told you to do it. So yes, I wanted to ask a question here too, but let's, I leave it. I'll save the more important question later on, because here we have a feature that you never have heard of it before. We call it live guidance. You get the guidance as you work. Normally, every method, otherwise, you read a book, you read learn it on the website or any other way, and then you go and do it. But when you do it, you don't have access to the guide. Yeah, you can of course go and read. Here instead, the guide will tell you what to do. It will not force you to do it, but it will suggest something you do. And that will create to-do lists, which help you to do the job. So it's almost like a GPS system for us. So we have here a tool which with which you can get created to-do lists suggested from the tool. Assume here you have a product backlog, and you see, to the left here you see product backlog and you see items ordered. You see that only half of it is ordered. It means we have not identified all items yet that are in backlog. And then you have product backlog item. That is an alpha. Every product backlog is an alpha, meaning something you can measure. It has how far have you come with dealing with product backlog. We have identified, say, 2/3 of them, but we have not identified all of them. And they have states, the product backlog item. Now we want to do an activity, refine the product backlog item. That is box 2 here, select to perform activity product backlog item. Automatically from the description and from the actual case, we create a to-do list here, and to the right, that is automatically created. You have the check boxes that you need to fill in, and as you can see, 2 of them are filled in, but 1 is not checked. And so you have a list, but then you can, in point 5, add new things that you think you need to do to achieve the outcome. So basically, this is, given the short time I have to talk about it, basically you get a list of things from the description, from the methodology, from the practices. You get a list of things to do and to implement. And you can then focus on this to-do list. And that helps the team to make progress. So, what we have here is a tool we call TeamSpace. TeamSpace go through an infinity loop. We start with, it consists of 2 parts, a learning cycle and delivery cycle. In the learning cycle, you discover what practices first up top. You can discover what practices are available. You go and explore, a tool help you to see what practices are available. You go to explore, and that you study 1 practice at a time. You adopt the practice, and meaning the team start to use it. You go up to adapt, and that means you change it so you think it works better for you. Now we move over to delivery cycle, where we start by planning and doing and checking. Checking is that we really did what we wanted to do. All these steps are involved in TeamSpace, but it's not like the most famous tools we have today are tools supporting agile management, for instance, Jira, GitLab. These tools are instance management tools, so they deal with the small things, but they don't help you with a big picture. They don't tell you what total problems you have to solve, whereas TeamSpace help you with a whole cycle, but not competing with Jira, because we don't deal, when you come into the delivery cycle. Of course, TeamSpace work very well in learning cycle, but when you come into the delivery cycle, we are working with groups of things, not with a small instance elements that you put in a backlog tool like Jira. So there is an absolutely fabulous integration between. We are going to now demo in a week or two how TeamSpace integrates with exactly Jira. And that is for a big bank, in executives of a big bank. All right, so now I'm getting to the closer. How is Essence adopted around the world? And there is a lot to say. There's a lot of people using it, but I will focus on a few examples. Example one, more than 10 universities use Essence already. Professor Pekka Abrahamsson in Finland says, my software engineering education in the future will be driven by Essence. And he developed tools, he developed things, so it's a lot of things happening there. Now, this is where I really want you to listen. The Essence Education Forum with 30 university professors is formed to promote Essence. So there is a forum, you can join it if you're interested. Here is the address for if you want to become a member. You can go to this address and you add yourself to a member of this forum. We have a meeting next Monday, and that is a meeting where we'll discuss activities. There are two books, one book that is written for universities. It's The Essentials of Modern Software Engineering, translated to Japanese and now translated to Korean and a couple of other languages. So this is the academic world. So let's go to the example two. This is industry. A lot of companies around the world are using Essence, but this is a very fresh case study coming from Hapag-Lloyd. Hapag-Lloyd has decided to put all their practices in a practice library and make available for different projects. They have already today many different variants of the same practice, but now we integrate it and create one practice that really works for more than one product. And as you can see, they are extremely happy with Essence. And if you would be interested to learn from them, you can do that. They are happy to help. And finally, Essence in methods. Jeff Sutherland, one of the co-founders of Scrum. You know, Scrum is the most developed practice ever in the history of software engineering. And so millions of people are Scrum Masters. He says over 50% of Scrum implementations fail to deliver. And we need to find tools and techniques to help us improve the odds against it. And he says, Essence is the key to driving success. He uses it in all his training now for both Scrum and Scrum at Scale. It's fantastic. Now I will give you takeaways. So when you leave here, what should you do? Well, there is a new, fresh video that introduces Essence, an Essence call for Scrum. This video will give you a feeling for how it really works. It will touch your nerves in a way that no book and no document can do. I really strongly recommend you to see this video. You have the address at the bottom of the page. And to finally ponder upon something. Professor Carlos Zapata, he wrote a blog and said 400 years from now, people will talk about Essence in the same way as people today talk about what Newton and Galileo did 400 years ago. Oh, yes, no one knows about that. But one thing is sure, that Essence is a very different thing than any of the methodologies you have heard about and seen. It's a very different thing because it is the basis for all methods. So that is my talk for today. So welcome to the future. It's here today. Thank you very much. So if we have time for questions, I'm more than happy.
Yeah, right. So thanks, Ivar, so much for the enlightening and interesting presentation. So we owe you a special thanks for being here after the COVID treatments. And as you know that we and my groups, we have done some research regarding the CMAT Essence. And we also successfully organized the first workshop on Essence on training and education. So we really promote these directions. And I really hope the talk today will also make impact as it did to me before.